Hi everyone, and welcome to the Chapter 2 Chemistry of Life video notes. We are going to focus on this set with Part 1, Properties of Water. And our goal for today is to explain how the properties of water that result from its polarity and hydrogen bonding affect its biological function. So some of the key concepts we're going to talk about today, we're going to make sure we can describe the structure of water. We're going to describe what the properties of water are. And then we're going to explain how those properties of water result from hydrogen bonding. One additional thing we're going to do is look at examples of these various properties of water. So water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, more specifically in a ratio. You may remember we talked about in the lesson primer and in our warm-up, it is H2O. Oxygen is more electronegative than hydrogen, meaning that it's going to keep the electrons closer around the oxygen nucleus. So this diagram should seem familiar. We have our oxygen molecule here. We've got the hydrogen bonds connected through these polar covalent bonds. So as we are describing the structure of water, we're going to be relating it to the way that it behaves. And one of the key aspects for water is the formation of those hydrogen bonds. So the formation of that hydrogen bond results from the attraction between the slightly negative end of one water molecule and the slightly positive hydrogen end of a different water molecule. And that's going to form hydrogen bonds. So these hydrogen bonds can either form between two water molecules, and sometimes they can form between other dissolved molecules or surfaces. Hydrogen bonds are also important in the structure of DNA and proteins. So on this diagram, what we're seeing here in this green dotted section, those are hydrogen bonds that are forming between water molecules. But you can also see here, this is what we call a nitrogenous base from something like DNA. And in between the nitrogenous bases, so this could be adenine and this could be guanine, you can see those dotted lines again representing hydrogen bonds. So now that we've talked about the structure of water, let's talk about the properties of water themselves. And these are the ones we're going to focus on. Versatile solvent. Water displays cohesion and adhesion. Water has a very high heat capacity. Water has a high heat of vaporization. And we're also going to talk about the density differences between liquid water and solid water. So the first property of water we're going to describe is the versatile solvent. Any polar molecule can interact with any other polar molecule through hydrogen bonding. And we can classify molecules as either hydrophilic, which means water-loving. These, in aqueous solutions, are polar molecules that become separated and surrounded by the water molecules. Nonpolar molecules are called hydrophobic, in other words, water-hating. The interactions between them are hydrophobic interactions, and they do not interact with water. So hydrophobic or nonpolar molecules will only interact with nonpolar or hydrophobic water-hating molecules. So we typically say like dissolves like. So hydrophobic stays with hydrophobic, hydrophilic stays with any other hydrophilic or polar molecule. So thanks to this, water is considered, or thanks to its ability to interact with polar molecules, water is considered a versatile solvent. So let's take a look at why this is important. In the cell, there are going to be many substances that are dissolved. And many times these substances may be polar substances, such as this sodium ion, and I know it's polar because it's got a positive charge to it. So what you see happen is this represents, this large structure here represents a water molecule. And this is the oxygen, these are the two hydrogens. Notice that the slightly negative end of this oxygen is surrounding this positively charged sodium. We call this a sphere of hydration. And again, it forms because of the way that this polar substance with this positive charge is attracting the negatively charged molecules of the oxygen that surround it. Contrast this to something like you see over here. This molecule right here is most likely methane. And methane, which is CH3, does not have a charge to it. So it is neither going to attract nor is it going to interact with any end of the water molecule, neither the negative end or positive end. And so not only is it not going to interact, but the non-polar substances are going to interact together and stick together. They are water hating. And so this sticking together of these non-polar or hydrophobic molecules is what's known as a hydrophobic interaction. So in addition to being a versatile solvent, water also has some other unique properties, such as cohesion and adhesion, which can also lead to surface tension. So let's talk about what these are. So for cohesion, this is referring to a water molecule sticking to another water molecule. This is done, of course, through hydrogen bonding. And so you can see how water is affected by cohesion in this image. So the water droplet itself has this very rounded shape. And over here, these water molecules are being pulled and held together by other water molecules, giving it this distinctive drop shape. And you can see this multiple times. So the reason it forms this sphere is because the water molecules, even down here on this edge, are being held together by the other water molecules that are within the drop of water. So adhesion is another similar property in that it is still talking about water sticking. But now what we're going to be looking at is how water sticks to a surface or water sticks to the inside edge of something else other than water. So in this example, we're looking at this diagram is showing both cohesion and adhesion. I'm focusing right now on the water sticking to the branch in this picture and just the branch. So the fact that the water sticks to it is what is called adhesion. Now, this water down here, the water molecules that are being held, kind of like held as in a chain. So you have water molecule here holding to this one, 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 and ultimately holding to the branch. These water molecules down here are sticking because of cohesion, but the ones that are actually touching the branch are touching due to adhesion. So this last one is surface tension. And I'm sure you've seen examples of water striders or other insects that are able to walk on water. And I like this picture because it shows here, due to the bending of the water on the surface, you can see it in the reflection, even though you can't necessarily see it in the image itself. So surface tension is a special example of cohesion. And this is water molecules sticking to themselves, sticking to the water beneath them. And it forms this film, this layer at the very top, that's going to basically resist any external force. And so the insects can take advantage of this and walk on water. Now, the interesting thing is that because with all of these three examples, cohesion and adhesion and surface tension, all of these are made possible due to those hydrogen bonds between water molecules or water molecules and the surface. Now, the next property of water we're going to talk about is what's known as the high specific heat capacity. So first, let's define what heat capacity is. So specific heat capacity, or just heat capacity, is the amount of energy it takes to raise the temperature of a substance by 1 degree. So how much energy is it going to cost or take to raise the temperature of a substance? And in the case of water, water has a very high heat capacity. And what that means is it's going to require a lot of heat, which is just energy, to raise the temperature of water. And the reason why water has such a high specific heat capacity is, you guessed it, those hydrogen bonds. So what's going to happen is the energy that's put into this system. So imagine that this is what we're looking at, all these water molecules. And again, the red dots represent hydrogen bonds. Now, these molecules are moving around. They have what is known as kinetic energy, which is how we measure temperature. Or kinetic energy is the measure, or temperature is the measure of the kinetic energy of a molecule. So as it's moving around. As you input energy into this system or into this area here, instead of being able to move around faster, what's happening is that some of the energy is being used to break these hydrogen bonds. And so as a result, the molecules don't move any faster than they had previously. And so the temperature of the water does not change. And so keep in mind that the kinetic energy, or Ke, is the temperature of the substance. Now, this is going to be very beneficial because that means that bodies of water can absorb a lot of energy, but not get instantly boiling or instantly hot. They have very much more mild temperature fluctuations. And so the organisms living inside those bodies of water aren't subjected to extreme fluctuations in temperature. And so one of the things I do a lot is, instead of writing the word change, I use the Greek symbol delta to indicate change. Many students will get the next property of water, the high heat of vaporization, confused with the specific heat capacity. So specific heat capacity is talking about just a temperature change, whereas the high heat of vaporization is talking about the energy required to change a substance from a liquid to a gas. And in the case of water, it has a high heat of vaporization. So I've provided a graph to go over with you all, and this is looking at how temperature, or increasing temperature, is going to affect or be affected by heat or energy added to a system. So we're going to start over here at this end at negative 20 degrees Celsius. And at this point right here, water is solid ice. And so as the amount of energy is increasing, as the heat is increasing, you can see that the temperature is also increasing. So we call this a positive correlation, or a positive or direct relationship. So as we add energy, we increase the temperature of the solid water here. And then we get to a point here where the ice, even though we're increasing the amount of energy, the temperature doesn't change. So we call this a phase change. More specifically, we call this melting. And so this is a phase change. This is not a temperature change. It is a change from solid to liquid. Once all the solid to liquid has melted, as we increasingly add energy, you see that the temperature starts to rise again, all the way up to about 100 degrees, at which point we go through the next phase change. And this phase change is going from liquid water to gas, and we call this evaporation. Now, the phase change itself is called, or the amount of energy that is required to change from a liquid to a gas is known as the heat of vaporization. And as you can see by this line here, as you can see by this line right here, it requires a lot of energy to convert liquid water into steam. If you wanted to know how much energy, and this graph, if this graph had data along here, you could simply use the data on this graph to determine how much energy is required. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is, again, summarize how those properties of water are important to life. And remember that these properties are all coming from the structure of water in those polar covalent bonds. So what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and pause the video and see if you can guess or correctly match the different properties that are listed here with the different examples of the property and the correct property that goes along with it. Okay, so at this point, I hope you paused the video and gave it a try. Here are the answers. And that is it, folks. These are the answers. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and I will answer. I'm also putting in the description box below some really great short explanations of these properties that I think will just help solidify, and they're interesting videos as well, but they won't take very long. So if you're still quite not sure about the properties or you just want a great review, check out the description box below. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.